Splendid, and welcome to the COMIT Happy Hour here on Friday, the 26th of November. And today we've got a really exciting lineup for you with Levi, Matt, Mark, and Fran. And we're going to be talking about how we can utilise BIM models for digital setting out and verification on the modern construction site. So before we start that, I'm going to hand you over to Stuart for a little bit of the housekeeping and admin. Stuart.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks for joining us all today. Question I get asked quite a lot, what is COMIT? COMIT is a community that's made up of owners, it's made up of contractors, it's made up of solution providers, and it's made up of academics. COMIT has a history of developing and running projects and webinars with a focus on increasing productivity for better outcomes. And as I'm reminding quite often, it's about the people as well as the process and the technology. So, as Ian just mentioned, today's session, we're very excited about this. We sent out some registration questions, which I'll get to in a moment, but the use of BIM models across the UK's construction sites is becoming the norm, as you'll see in a second. When it comes to the construction layout and verification process, we tend to revert to the older methods. Leica Geosystems have specifically designed construction software that enables construction layout and verification to work directly from and to the BIM model. We'll hear in a moment and discuss the efficiencies and cost savings that can be achieved by working directly from the BIM model and providing accurate, as constructed verification back to the model. We will also show how these efficiencies can be maximised by taking advantage of our construction management partnerships. Okay, so I just want to share something else with you and an announcement. Questions, please do send some questions. We've got some questions that came in with registration. We do hope to cover those, but if you've got any burning questions in between, please feel free to send them in during the session and I'll answer those at the end. Okay, the next announcement is a new member, and we're very blessed to have Matthew with us today from EuroCAD. Welcome. I'd now like to introduce the team. So, from left to right, that may not be how it appears on your screen, but from on the slide, we've got Levi Brown, and Levi is a reality capture specialist at Leica Hexagon. We've got Matt, digital integration specialist, also at Leica Hexagon. We've got Mark from the contracting world, who's with Buckingham. Mark's an engineering surveyor. I mentioned a second ago about Matt. Matt is a director at EuroCAD and a director at SiteDesk. And we've got Fran. Fran is a technology strategist and research analyst, and also a visionary, futurist, BIM for FM. And we'll hear from Fran shortly. Well, incidentally, I'll just mention the next webinar we've got, and I'll get to it at the end. Fran is backed by popular demand to deliver toys for techies, and that's going to be on the 10th of December. So, one of the things that I need to mention is the questions at registration. It's around about now we do some poll questions, but we did things slightly differently this time, and thank you to everybody that participated in this. How often do you utilise the BIM model on your projects? And these are the questions we asked you to answer. So every project, sometimes, rarely, never. Well, these are the answers. We had 40%, 31, 13, 16. Now, if there's time, we'll get the panel to answer to each one of those questions. But I just thought I'd share that at the beginning. It was well worth doing, and thank you for doing that. The second and final question is, what is the biggest barrier and difficulty in using BIM models on projects? And again, these were the answers: availability, accuracy, cost, and liability. And these were the replies. Again, I'll save that to the end because we have got a heck of a lot of questions that came in previously. Plus, I can see questions have already started. So I'm going to save that until the end. Just one thing as well, if we do run out of time at the end, we have something called the extra time. So at the end of the hour, we've got the option to run over if that's okay with everybody that's attending. So thank you. And now what I'll do is I'll hand over to Levi, and Levi can take us through the main session. So thanks again for everybody joining us. Levi, it is all yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stuart. Appreciate that. So you might see me glancing over to my right a little bit. That's because I've had to switch my screens and my notes are over here. So yeah, welcome to today's session, utilising BIM models, digital setting out and verification. Stuart's kindly already introduced me, so no need to do that. We can dive straight in. So what we're looking at today, as the title suggests, is utilising BIM models, digital setting out and verification. And for me, this all sits under what we would call this verification umbrella. So what we're going to look at is what is construction verification and why do we need it? And then we're going to look at 3 phases of construction verification, really, utilising the BIM model from the very beginning, real-time construction verification, and then we're going to have a look at this mass verification. And if we've got time, like Stuart said, we'll have a little look at the next steps for the industry before we open up our panel discussion. So if we look at the question, what is construction verification? Well, it's fairly self-explanatory. It's the process of physically verifying what we've constructed conforms to the design requirements that were set out at the beginning of the project. Now, as you're probably aware, there's a very strong demand in the construction industry to minimize mistakes and waste and costly reworks, which lead on to costly overruns into the project. And this is because, on average, construction companies lose around 20% of their profit margins to mistakes that happen on site. So that is quite a lot if you think about it, especially when you consider that construction companies are only often working to around 1 or 2% annual profit margins to begin with. So there's clearly a need to close this gap, and the modern methods of construction verification we're going to look at are going a long way to making this happen. So for those of you who've joined this session, and we can see from the panel questions, you know, some of you already seem to indicate that you're using construction verification, which is very commendable. So hopefully this will show some ways in which you might be able to improve or add to those workflows. And for those of you who don't currently use construction verification, well then hopefully this opens up your eyes to why we need it and how easy it is to employ on your sites. So to recap that really quickly then, what is construction verification and why do we need it? Well, we need it to minimize the mistakes that knock on to remedial works, which helps keep projects on schedule and maintain those small profit margins that we looked at. And it also affords us the opportunity to learn, to quantify data and to progress. So as we go to the next project, as an industry, we're doing better and better each time. So using BIM models from the start, there's a principle in the world of surveying, which doesn't change. If you start right, it sets you in good stead. So when an engineer or surveyor is doing a primary traverse, for instance, they'll take their time and they'll do it right because they know the positive impact that this is going to have on the secondary and tertiary control and therefore the data that's collected. The principle is basically good data in gives good results out the other end. And although 3D design is nothing new to the construction industry, it is, you know, as an industry, we can be fairly slow to adopt some of these processes. So what we're going to look at now is utilizing the BIM model from the very beginning, because a team has gone through a lot of effort to create this wonderful model. And what tends to happen is that this design model gets decimated down into a 2D drawing. The orientation might be changed. Sometimes even a digital copy doesn't get to site. We end up with a PDF printout. And by the time it gets to our site, say in London on a rainy day, our engineer's standing there holding a soggy PDF printout, wondering why, you know, we do set things out in the wrong place to begin with. So hopefully that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the principle is, why are we creating more unnecessary steps in this process when, you know, we could be tapping into that direct resource, this design model, and cutting out all the unnecessary steps that inevitably lead to mistakes on site. So the very first step in construction verification is to do everything we can to make sure we're minimizing the opportunity and using the BIM to make mistakes and using the BIM model from the very beginning. So if you're not already, you know, some of those poll questions seem to indicate that I think it was 16% from memory aren't using it, or 13% were rarely using it. Hopefully it's only because you didn't realize that that technology exists and that you are able to go from the office, from BIM, straight into the field. And if you're not utilizing it, hopefully, you know, this will give you a bit more of an indication or a boost to use it. And we'll have a look at that a little bit in a minute. But to get this across a bit more visually, I'm going to play you a video. It's a bit easier to get across than my slide deck.
Achieving success in today's complex world of construction demands smarter, faster, and less error-prone tools than plumb bobs and tape measures. Being able to take the design to the field with high accuracy at a pace that can overcome unforgiving timelines and last-minute changes has become the benchmark. Requiring only one person to operate, the Leica ICT30 construction layout tool makes layout tasks extremely efficient, freeing up valuable crew members to perform other tasks. Construction environments are often busy and challenging, causing the prism to lose line of sight. In this situation, having a layout tool that is smart enough to anticipate your movement and reacquire lock prevents you from having to slow down. While having a smart layout tool that keeps you moving forward without losing a step is important, it is only part of the story. Being easy to set up and operate is the other. The intuitive touchscreen interface of the ICT30's field controller allows you to easily interact with the design layout, helping you move from point to point with confidence. This encourages team members of all skill levels to pick up and go with the ICT30. Referencing a 3D model in the field provides a visual point of reference that helps to understand complex layouts at a glance. And with reflectorless operation, the ICT30 can go anywhere you can, eliminating the need for awkward workarounds, tools like plumb bobs, or help from others, keeping you moving from point to point. The ultimate versatility, invaluable quality, and the comforting dependability of the ICT30 by Leica Geosystems enables every team member to deliver with confidence. Rethink what's possible.
So I'm hoping you could all hear that okay. And there was some products from our icon range, and I know it's difficult sometimes to get the full extent of what we're trying to say through a slide deck or through a video, but I'd encourage you to reach out if it's something you would like to see if you haven't already seen it. So the principle again is good data in equals good results out, and this minimizes the opportunity to let mistakes creep in from the very beginning, which minimizes, you know, the factor for human error. I mean, it's basic maths in pretty much any application. If you reduce the steps to get from A to B, you tend to improve efficiency and productivity, and this had a knock-on effect to project schedules and, again, profit margins. So step one in this construction verification umbrella is to utilize the BIM model as soon as possible, if we can, from the very beginning. But if we've done that, one of the things that might be out of our control is how well our workforce or our subcontractors or whoever it may be actually then builds what we have inevitably set out correctly. And that leads on nicely to our second phase of verification. And this is real-time verification. So one of the things I've mentioned a few times, you'll hear me say quite often and talk about, is remedial works that need to be done on site. And this is because typically in the past, it was a bit of a taboo subject. No one really wants to ever admit that they do sometimes build things in the wrong place. But the fact is that remedial works on site are a daily occurrence. And if we think about that, the fact that we found a problem and we're fixing it is good. But the problem then now is that that ship has sailed. The problem that we have is that we didn't get the information at the right time, or we found out too late. Works have to stop as we regroup and take stock of the issue and find a solution under pressure. Whereas, you know, and this has a knock-on effect to the schedule and other elements moving forward. And if we think about sometimes we find the problem on site too late. This has an impact then on elements that have been installed correctly that need to be removed, reworked, or altered to fix this problem that we've just found. So if we'd had the information sooner, we would have been able to rectify the issue before these knock-on effects, or at least move forward with the project, having this in the back of our mind and being able to take some time to think of the best solution, not only for the projects, but it has an impact on the stakeholders, more often than not for the environment as well, and for the overall quality of our builds. So it's very clear then that timing is important. We need the right information at the right time. And in most instances, the right time is really as soon as possible. It's not in a week or a month's time. In some instances, that information wants to be made available to us immediately in real time. And when we think about real time, what do we mean? Well, if we consider, say, for instance, a concrete pour, if we have a verification report delivered on a concrete pour a week after it's poured, that's great. In some instances, I'm sure you'll agree, that would be considered fast, but the concrete slab is already set. Would it be much more beneficial if you had your verification report in time, in minutes, so that you could make adjustments and fix things on the concrete while it's still wet and pliable? I'm sure you'd agree, yeah, that would be very beneficial. So if we pick up where we left off in step 2, we have the design model that we've used to set out, and now we have on site the physical manifestation of whatever it might be. It might be a slab, it might be a wall, it might be a column, but we've got something now to verify against. So using a total station, we can either take shots that we do on site traditionally, but even traditionally, when we take shots, we go back and we process the data. Now that we have the IFC or whatever model on our logger in real time, we can see deviations from design to as-built very, very quickly. And then if we take that step further, if we utilize something like the MS60, which is a multi-station, it unlocks the potential to capture much more detail and data, so on a bit more of a larger scale than before. And then we can visualize this data, and actually I've got another video which probably explains it a little bit better as well, gives you some visuals. So I'll play that now.
Find out how Leica Icon Verification app can further increase your productivity on site with any Leica Geosystems robotic total station or the MS60 multi-station. Errors in the construction process can lead to costly rework, which can negatively impact the project schedule. But how do we prove that we've built the design tolerances? For example, how flat is that concrete? Is the concrete equally poured at every point? Are we within tolerance? With the Leica Icon Verification app combined with the MS60 multi-station, we can easily provide answers to these questions. Simply scan the area of interest, calculate real-time verification results directly in the field, lay out and highlight out-of-tolerance areas, which enables immediate correction of any discrepancies before the concrete starts to dry out. The Leica Icon Verification app helps you answer even more questions on site, such as, how vertical is this wall or column? Were they built in the right place? Do they match to our design? Using any Leica Geosystems robotic instrument, like the Icon ICR80, our customers can also verify other objects, such as walls and columns, with laser point measurements. For HVAC and MEP technicians, real-time verification allows comparing the design file against the actual installation on site within minutes, and without needing to access the target. All verification data and reports can be easily exported and sent to the office where critical project decisions are made. Real-time verification with the Leica Icon makes it possible to speed up project progress to reduce potential unnecessary rework and costs. Capture, verify, layout, instantly and without leaving the construction site. Visit our website to learn more.
So as we can see from the video there, utilizing the BIM model in real time, whether it's with a normal total station or something like the MS60 where we scan, it gives us the key information and at the right time, so that we can make those instant decisions. So not only are we getting that information in real time, but as you noticed in the beginning, we're then able to feed back into the real world and set out and pinpoint those key elements that are out of tolerance, that might be out of tolerance, that need to have work done to them. And then we can inform the relevant team of what action needs to be taken to get the project back on track. all in good time. So we're really opening up this dynamic link between the digital world and the physical, taking the model, setting it out, checking it into the digital world, and then back out again to make any checks and adjustments. So as we can see in step 2, it focuses on a small-ish specific areas of the construction phase. And for step 3 now, we're going to look at verification on a mass scale, but still using the BIM model. So if you're not aware already of Leica Geosystems and Hexagon technology, you might not be aware of the reality capture solutions that we have. So there's a very wide and vast portfolio of accurate, reliable, very easy to use scanners. We really are democratizing reality capture within the industry. And I won't dwell too long on the actual hardware. You know, if you're interested in this, it's always something we can follow up with. But we have in this image here, from left to right, we have our BLK2Go dynamic handheld scanner, which picks up rapid information. We have our BLK360, which is our entry-level scanner into the market, and then we have our RTC360 and our P-series scanners if we want to capture more data quickly. So if you don't know about laser scanners, just to give you an example, they capture lots and lots of data very, very quickly. So the RTC360, for instance, here is capable of capturing a 360-degree point cloud, 260 meters in diameter in as little as 26 seconds. So it's really capturing mass accurate data and putting it in the hands where you can actually do something with it very, very quickly. So if you think about this, the ability to capture all this data, that takes a fraction of the time it would traditionally, we can then start to apply some of the principles that we looked at in step 2 and apply it on a much, much bigger scale. So we're going to have a look at Cyclone 3DR. It's not the only reality verification software we have, but it's the one I'm going to focus on really quickly today. It's an all-in-one deliverable solution for all things mass data and BIM. And it has Jetstream technology at its core, so it's very, very well, it's very, very good at dealing with mass data. As we know, scan data and BIM models can be quite large. And it tries to automate the process as much as possible so we can get to a deliverable at the end. So let me demonstrate an example. I'm going to open up Cyclone 3DR. This is the video I'm going to talk over. So we can import our model. In this instance, it's an IFC model of our offices in Milton Keynes. And then we can also link some scan data to this. So this has been linked into the site control. So when we bring it in, both are on Ordnance Survey grid. And we are able to then define, if we want to, new user coordinate systems. Sometimes easier to have a coordinate system that's relative to a face or something, or a unique feature that we're trying to analyze. So if we create a new user coordinate system and then start to isolate aspects of this building that we want to analyze, if we didn't want to analyze the whole thing at once, which is also an option. So once we've isolated, say, this east face of the building, we can then go ahead and convert the point cloud into our 3DR project. So that now sits in the 3DR environment. And then we can do the same with the model. So 3DR allows us to name and regroup and ungroup aspects of the IFC. And we can then use this to isolate the same face in the model so that we can run our analysis against. So the model is providing our as design, and the scan data is giving us our as built location. So once we're happy with that, we can go ahead and run the analysis, which is lightning fast. And we'll be able to see here in the preview that it was very, very easy to then define the tolerances that we want to set. In this instance, we've gone with everything in green is plus or minus 15 mil, everything above is in red, everything below is in blue. But the takeaway is it's very dynamic with how you display the out of tolerance areas. And then if we wanted to highlight key areas of deviation within this analysis, we can do so with these labels. And this data pulls through into our deliverables as well. So if we highlight these key locations and then look to spit out a report, Cyclone 3DR automatically generates, every time we run an analysis, a PDF report. And this can be exported in either a 2D or a 3D PDF format or a CSV file. Now, 3D PDF formats are very, very useful for those who want a bit more contextual data, but aren't able to utilize a CAD program or wouldn't usually be able to open up and work with 3D data. So as I mentioned, we have these 2D and 3D PDF deliverables, as well as the CSV deliverables. And it's also worth mentioning that we have a fair few bits of free viewing software. So we have Cyclone 3DR free viewer, which is fairly self-explanatory. It's a free viewer for any analysis data done in Cyclone 3DR. But what this does is it puts a rich, a wealth of information into the hands of people who need it. And again, it's about timing. It's putting that information to them at a time when they can really use it. So it's not quite as real time as we looked at in phase 2, but we are talking about hours rather than days and weeks and months to correlate all this information and get very accurate reports out of it. Now, we're also aware, we said at the beginning, that the construction industry isn't always open to adopting new technology. So if you're sitting there thinking, you know what, going from a 2D printout that we're used to delivering to this full 3D model with all these colors, if that sounds a bit daunting, don't worry. We can utilize the mass data capture, the power of Cyclone 3DR to simply run analysis sections or polyline sections through our analysis data and immediately export them to something like AutoCAD and have a deliverable in a more traditional sense, but still doing it in the fraction of the time. And we understand whatever, people have different deliverables, they have different requirements. So whatever deliverable that you're used to using or want to use, we can work with you to achieve that. We're trying to democratize this as much as possible and not have to make you take massive leaps from workflows you might be using. But the principle again is giving us the right information at the right time, which then gives us the confidence to move on to the next phase of works, knowing that what we have already built is correct and we can sleep well at night. Bit of a delay, bear with me. There we go. So a quick recap on those 3 aspects we looked at under this verification umbrella. Utilizing BIM models from the start was step 1. And sort of the question to you is, are you utilizing the design model? And obviously that was a question that we asked in the polls, and we might be able to have a look at that a little bit later. And then we looked at real-time construction verification. And the question again to you guys is, are you waiting longer than necessary to get your geospatial information? And if so, why? Is it you weren't aware of the technology, or are you apprehensive? And this is something that we can obviously talk about. And then we looked at mass verification, and how can we help you adopt mass verification to give you the confidence and upscale the industry as a whole. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, in the agenda, what's the next steps for the industry. So we saw those principles. We have that BIM model. We're using it at the beginning. We're using it for real time. We're using it on mass. And then if we look forward to where we're going, the next step in construction is starting to include autonomy. So if we think about our latest releases, the BLK ARC, it's not just a gimmick. If you think about the scenario where we build during the day, we have an automated system that walks around our building site at night, captures lots of rich 3D data, use the scripting functionality in Cyclone 3DR to give us a verification report that when we come in the next day, we can see how accurately we built the previous day, and we can make those informed decisions and having the right information at the right time. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you today to whet your appetite, and thank you for listening, and I will hand back over to Stuart.
Thank you, Levi. That was fantastic. Some of those things were only things I could dream about when I was setting out, but wow, what a difference. Incredible. Can I invite everybody back in, please? Wow, I bet everybody's thinking the same. Wow, 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 wow.
I should probably add as well, real quickly, that it's not conceptual. These are things that are being used right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, there's a few questions here which directly relate to what you've shown. But I'm also conscious of the other questions that we've got from the registration, because I think people signed up with a real keenness to learn more about this. I think over 50% of the registrants said they really want to learn how they can make this work. So hopefully with our panel session, you can give a bit more of an explanation of how you can get from the BIM model to actually doing it on site. And also, I presume, as-built stuff as well. So I'm just wondering, can I bring, is Ian? Ian, are you out there? Can you, you
I'm
are
here.
there?
A few camera issues here.
I see you there.
Need to
Okay.
throw jumper on as well. It's getting cold.
That's all right. No, fine. So we've got a whole bunch of questions. Ian, I don't know whether you want to kick off with the first few.
Yeah, there's some interesting questions that I think they came in on the registration. Now, I'm always very cautious of these questions in the fact that when they talk about BIM model, to me, a BIM model is a data model. But what we're talking about here is actually a BIM 3D model, as in a CAD model. And I think that definition is really quite important right from the very beginning. So in my mind, what they're talking about here is a 3D CAD model. So, so the first question that's coming here is, why is it quicker to set out from a 3D CAD model, BIM model, their words?
Do you want me to say this one?
Why is it quicker?
Yeah, well, straight off the bat, I would say from the presentation there, the quickest route from A to B is usually from A to B. And as an industry, what we tend to do is add other little steps. So say, for instance, when I was on the tools, I would never get a 3D model. I would often get a PDF printout. So if you think about where that originated from, what we've done is we've taken the 3D PDF, we've decimated it, changed its orientation, and then by the time, like I said, it gets to you, it's a PDF. And what that does as well is you lose a bit of trackability. If I have a PDF from last week, how do I know that that PDF is actually still correct? If there are changes, they tend to happen at the top level. And then if you have this trickle down, the longer that trickle down takes, in some instances that could be a week. And if you're working off a drawing that is a week old, you're already on a back foot. So even from that aspect, you save time.
Yeah, I could just add to that, having tried to set out a set of lights that I was putting in a ceiling, just purely by a tape measure and a pen and a drawing. Oh my word, never again, never again. So definitely those extra steps, yeah.
Certainly from my side, on the MEP side, so on the MEP modeling front, it isn't so much the speed of the data, it's the accuracy of the data. It's okay knowing from maybe just a typical 2D plan that there is roughly a builder's work opening there or a below ground pop-up, but I need to know really exactly where it is so that that IPS will definitely fit it in. When you got that extra detail of knowing exactly within that concrete hole where the actual pop-up is, or that builder's work hole is definitely sort of there, rather than a kind of sort of rough one that you're going to wait a lot longer for, quicker data back sooner at richer level is so useful for us. So
yeah, well believe that. So the second question, I suppose, leads on from that. So I now know that it is more efficient. I get better productivity I'm setting out from that 3D model. But why do I have to go and buy? So the question here is about buying a laser scanner. Why do I need a laser scanner in this? I can already use a total station to verify the objects. Why am I needing that laser scanner? Perhaps Mark might be able to help us out, or Matt Hull.
Sorry,
You're on.
muted. You're okay. Sorry. I'll take this one if that's okay. So I guess kind of if you're wanting to look at doing kind of very accurate kind of as-built verification, then laser scanning really steps into that kind of gap. If you're looking at doing it with the total station, you're maybe only recording 2 or 3 points on, say, if we're looking at an MEP side of things, you're recording 2 or 3 points on a pipe. And that'll tell you whether or not the pipe's there, but it won't give you an awful lot of information of if it deviates in any way. And with the laser scanner, we're starting to get thousands up to millions of points on that particular item that we can then use to do that more accurate and more in-depth analysis. So it's a tool in a toolbox. Laser scanning has its position when it comes to kind of construction verification, but then also if we're looking for doing that setting out, then we can sort of get that inherent accuracy of using the actual design model whilst we're out on and setting out on site.
Brilliant. So, a question on this. There's new technology that we're looking to use here, new methodologies and processes. One of the questions was about the fact that they've got some very experienced site engineers. They're very good at doing the job. They've got years of experience within that. How and why should we ask him to try these new methods? And I think this is really aimed at Mark, because you've probably got a good range of teams out there, experienced people. How are you getting them to use new methodologies?
I think it's what we've been trying to do is just slowly just transition them over and just see the benefits that they can actually see the real time. So in the case of, I can use an example where put some steel work in, and traditionally you'd kind of do a shot at the top of the piece of steel and a shot at the bottom to just check it's the verticality of it. But that's fine. But what we've been able to try and transition over to scanning the whole column itself. And at first people say, oh, well, that takes forever, but it really doesn't. And then being able to see kind of that heat map on the controller itself is reap the benefits really. Just the visually being able to see, yep, that's all green, that's steel, happy days, we can carry on. I think that's come with the development with the technology as well.
Yeah, so they're really seeing the benefit. Are they becoming the converted and then encouraging others, or are they still sort of, tentative at the moment on using it?
If I could just sort of spin onto that sort of Ian more, and then maybe for Matt to sort of answer, not so much sort of the trying to get people to adopt, but maybe that the reality capture side and being more digital allows more people to be able to be involved as well, and opens up the opportunity. I don't know, Mark, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's so. Those are kind of the sort of the culture and adoption kind of things in the UK. Fran, just thinking here, is it different in the States? Are you finding that the adoption of these technologies, methodologies is faster out there, or is it very similar to here?
I think a lot depends on the industry and the region. You may take industries like the oil and gas. They might be more interested in the precision aspects of things as opposed to general building construction. But in some ways, I think the UK is advanced in some of these technologies, especially moving forward somewhat. As Levi mentioned, the autonomous nature coming, the use of the big dog, the robotics, the drones, and things like that. Although many years ago, I introduced many of those things and talked about them, but I think I saw much quicker adoption in the UK of some of those technologies. So if I had to sort of just make a guess, and this isn't scientific, but I would think the UK is maybe a bit more, especially as they've gotten into heavy transportation, rail construction projects and things like that. There, the precision becomes a bigger deal as we move, and I think again as we go into different industries, I think that's critical. Levi, I have a general question. Do you find certain infrastructure things to make better use of the product?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of vertical industry tends to adopt ever so slightly more over sort of the long linear projects. I think it's the size of the project also has an impact. When I think back to the question Ian first asked about, these customers that have these skilled engineers, that are doing a very good job, I'd actually say that's a great place to start. We're not here changing the principles of engineering and surveying. We are opening up the capabilities and the range in which you do so. So like Matt said, we're not doing 2% verification anymore. When we hand over a verification report from mass data capture, we're verifying close to 100%. So those are very good points, but it works back the other way. Someone asking why should we use scanners, could almost ask them, you tell us why have there been, have a think back to some recent projects? Has there been remedial works? Could you have found them sooner if you were adopting some more modern methods of construction, and then maybe do a return investment analysis on that?
Yeah, I had another question, Ian, if I can just sort of direct it there for Levi. You mentioned you showed 2 scanners, and we took point clouds, we talked laser scanning, but then you started talking about thermal and photogrammetry, and so it's not just point clouds that you're doing with these devices now. You're using multiple. In fact, I think you used the term sensormatic or sensor station or something like that. So it's a multiple sensor technology that's creating better, I'll use the term point clouds, but that means more than laser scanning. Is that correct in what you're doing?
So I mentioned the multi-station, which is the total station which has the laser scanner capabilities. I didn't actually mention photogrammetry, but you are correct in that depending, photogrammetry, LiDAR, single point measurements, they all come with their own accuracies. So depending on the project and what you're actually trying to achieve, then yes, there are multiple different sensor types and data capture methods that you could implement.
And just to sort of bounce on that, Levi, sorry. So for instance, the BLK 360, which is what we use quite a bit, and on its base, when it's doing its photogrammetry capture, it does a heat map as well, which is really sort of useful. I mean, you're getting that extra data within the basic capacity that is really usable then, again, especially in an M&E environment. So
yes, yeah.
Interesting. So on that sort of front, on the sort of return on investment world that Levi was just talking about there, it's a question back to Mark again, really. Obviously, as an organisation, you need to justify the expenditure of that. Are you finding that clients are more willing to pay more to get that more accuracy and the speed, or are you finding that actually because you're doing that work and your productivity is increasing, and because of that your profitability is increasing, you don't have to increase your costs to the client, and actually there's a benefit across the board without having to cross charge? What's your sort of positioning in there?
I think for ourselves, where you touch on kind of efficiency. So we internally, we provide survey solutions for all our construction projects across the UK. And what we found with the kind of reality capture solutions is that we're being able to efficiently capture a lot quicker the data. Take an example of where we installed a bridge over a railway, and we scanned the solution, scanned the bridge that was installed, and the same day we had a drawing out to site to show what had moved, how it needed rotating to fit back in. So being able to do that single day turnaround, which if you're traditionally going to survey it, go back to the office process, would be a couple of days easily. So we are finding a lot greater efficiency achieved, and as a result, site teams are more interested in kind of using those solutions, definitely.
That's great. So you're sort of finding that it pays for itself within the project quite quickly. And so you don't have to pass that expense on to anybody else. What you're doing is you're actually making it more profitable for yourselves to use the technology in the first place. That's a really nice. It's nice to know, because many people come to us with questions about who's going to pay for this technology. And my response is always, if there isn't a value in there, if you can't find that value, then nobody should be paying for it in the first place. But it sounds like that value is already embedded in what you do. So that is really nice to hear. So let's just keep going down the list of questions we've got here. There's a couple here that are probably a little bit more technical than so you're going to have to forgive me for the wordage here. I'm probably going to get this wrong, so I'll read it out absolutely. So the new BLK arc looks like a gimmick to me. What's the actual point of it? Okay, you already have a BLK okay to go, which a person can walk around with. So tell me, what's the difference between the two? What's giving me that extra value? I suppose Levi or Matt, Hull.
Do you want me to take that one, Levi?
I don't mind. Yeah, you go first, and I'll add
Okay,
something.
so basically the idea in the likes of our BLK Arc or our BLK to Fly, which are our autonomous solutions, the idea is to be able to do that autonomous reality capture. So if we're looking at, I used an example, we were at a show in London for Digital Construction Week, and I used the example of, for example, a data center project. If you're having to repeatedly check a project, maybe if you're doing construction verification, if you're doing construction progress monitoring, it's more effective for you to have an autonomous solution to walk around on the same path and collect the same data consistently, autonomously, on either a daily or a weekly basis, rather than having to get somebody to try and record that exact same data each time. So being able to use something like we're using the Boston Dynamics Spot, to be able to use that to autonomously walk around, say at night when there's nobody on site, collect that data, and then upload that directly so it is ready for you to do that analysis in the morning, is more cost effective than actually having to send somebody out on site to collect that data and process it and then start to do that analysis.
If I could just sort of jump on the back of that as well, I mean, obviously with certain environments, me and Ian are kind of involved with, there might be areas, whether it's on site or something, where you don't actually want to have that risk of having the personnel down there. It could be enclosed space, could be in certainly nuclear industry in certain spaces around there. Speaking to a couple of drone geeks before, and obviously any sort of military type things, sending in something that, okay, you want to risk 100, I can't remember how much it is off the shelf or a life. It's like, hopefully it's whatever you spent off the shelf. So depending where you are.
Brilliant. Excellent. Okay. No, that's good. There's another question here, and actually one that I'm interested in, and specifically there's a group that I chair within the Reserve Forces, which is the Reserves Innovation Working Group, looking at taking bits of technology. Yeah, Matt is always already a firm member of that one. So taking technology that we use in our civvy worlds and trying to get it into a military context and using it in the world that we live in to try and improve what we do in the military world. So this is a question I want to hear the answer to, because I want to do the same thing. It says, can I get any trials of the hardware and software that were presented? Because yes, please, I'd like some of that. And I think we probably would like to take that out to Kenya or Belize next year, Matt.
So Levi gave me 5 beers over at Digital Construction Week, so he'd come out to Belize and take it. So yeah, so there are a few things in play. Yeah. Awesome. Although I think we should get an arc instead, maybe. Yeah.
So the very quick answer to your question, Ian, is yes. We actually encourage it. We're not here to shift boxes and just sell you a piece of kit, especially within the construction industry where we're looking at verification most. It's an onboarding process. So that usually involves a period where, yes, you take a trial, you use it in anger. We're there to support, give you our expertise and our knowledge that we've gleaned. And if you've got projects in far-flung places that you want us to come along to, then I will definitely be available for that.
All for the good of service of Leica, yeah.
Of course, of course.
Can I just jump in here and just say thanks for the questions we've got so far, but please do keep them coming. We've had a variation already, but I'm pretty sure there's other questions. Thank you.
I think there's I think whether you've answered this question that's just come in here as well. Hang on, let me I put my glasses down somewhere, and damn if I can read what's on the screen. My apologies.
Which one is it? In what number?
I can't even read the numbers, let alone the letters. Hang on.
Okay, well, listen, there's one question here that I'm going to just pick out. I know you touched on it a little bit. This is a small house builder that's asking the question. And the question is it worth using BIM? Small house builder. Now, I don't know how many units he's building a week or a month or a year, but is it worth using it? Levi?
Well, yeah, I mean, those follow-on things that you just said will have an impact. So is it worthwhile utilizing BIM on projects? So he's basically asking about what size of project does it need to be to utilize a BIM model. I would kind of come back and say, if you have a BIM model or that 3D geometry, then yes, because I think if you're going to take anything away, the key thing is that model, that's where a lot of the work has already happened. So all we're trying to do is help you tap into that so you can get more accurate data and not work as hard, is the principle. So I would say yes, if you have that available to you, doesn't matter on the size, it will save you time and therefore help the quality and save you money at the end of the day.
Okay, and with that in mind, one further question that tags onto that. Given that small house builders generally multitask all day, every day, how would you describe the ease of adoption of the system, of the software, for them to be able to do the act, if you will?
Well, I'd probably tooting our own horn a little bit in the UK, but as a team, Leica are very, very good at holding hands and helping people adopt technology. So it's as easy as you want to make it for us, really. We'll come and help you and show you. And touching on what you said before as well, if someone has that model available to them, that small house builder, if they are already using a total station, then it's literally just switching from a 2D DWG to a 3D model. If they are using tapes and strings still, then obviously we've been doing that we've helping people to convert from those workflows for years over to 2D, and the principles are exactly the same.
Okay, great.
Sorry, Stuart, can I just jump back onto the house builder side?
Yeah.
So that, certainly on the kind of value proposition side. Now, obviously, when you're a house builder, you still got to produce your as-builts anyway. So you still need a way of being able to record that. And certainly on the point cloud, the reality capture side, there's going to be a lot of, especially off the back of COP26. Now we're looking at obviously how we're dealing with assets, whether it's a legacy or handover. Now, one of the best ways of sort of capturing legacy assets is the reality capture side. Now, if you have that kind of data of a point cloud, it might not be used initially, but almost as part of the actual handover for that project, whether it is a sort of small scale house or it is obviously a large scale building, that data that could be utilized for the client later on, it's like an extra service proposition handed over by yourself to feed into your value proposition. It's giving them better data that's usable later on in quite a lot of platforms in regards to the asset management side. So it doesn't just stop at obviously finishing the building. That data utilization after that is it's going to be very big soon. So
leaping to the other end of the spectrum here, from the small house builder into the larger infrastructure world thing, the critical national infrastructure world, and things like that. There's always an issue in my mind when we're using cloud computing, when we're using online services, about security, especially around critical national infrastructure, especially around things that have a sensitive nature about them. You talked about your presentation that it's using cloud-based storage and it's going through that. What's your experience so far on the security element of that, and how acceptable has it been? A bit technical, but it might be relevant to some people on our call.
Well, I'll start this one off, and I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Matt. I mean, we're about options. So although yes, you can utilize cloud-based solutions, whether it be for your drawings or your cloud data, you don't have to. I mean, that's the way the civilian world is going. But if we're in an environment where we need to have our data secure, then that's not an issue. In fact, the latest firmware, for instance, for the RTC360, allows us to completely lock off the Wi-Fi, so that it can't be then edited or tampered with without a special security code. So if you were going to take it into an environment where you needed to have that data locked down and local purely on a USB stick, then we've already started to make allowances and accommodations for that.
The other side is obviously a lot of people have different security concerns. It's obviously quite a vast sort of range and how they want to store that data. Now, we've been sort of having chats with Leica with my other hat on over at Site Desk in regards to the developer kit that's coming out next year. So not to get too geeky with people, but there is going to be that utilization for you to be able to sort of plug into the data to bring and utilize it in security formats or different sort of ways in your own way anyway. It's just a really interesting way that data is going to be exploited even further. So
okay, thanks for the answers to that, guys. I think that answers Ben's question. Ben, if it does, give us a thumbs up.
That'd be cool. Just on a similar sort of line, do you have, Fran, in the States, do you have similar sort of concerns over cloud-based or that sort of data for your national infrastructure? Fran?
I'm sorry, you were fading in and out there.
So it's just purely, do you have similar sort of concerns about cloud-based data storage in the US that we have in the UK?
As far as the data formats and exchanges, or the security aspects of it?
Purely on the security aspect, in the fact that when something is a national infrastructure or it's a critical piece of real estate or an asset, and we don't want that information to be stored outside of the national boundaries or in insecure as it gets data centers. The fact that it might be replicated in another country, the other country then has a political falling out with our country, and that data is suddenly not available or is too available to the people who might want to do us harm.
Yeah, well, there's multiple layers, obviously, as in any security, but at the Levi had mentioned, securing the data by the connection, turning off the Wi-Fi, so you can't get into that data at that point. But you have to look at the layers too. It's being put into, a BIM, or it's accessing a BIM envelope somewhere. So that layer has to be secured. Information that is transmitted for usage for the owner operator that needs to access it. How are they accessing it? What rights do they have? It may be okay to see the point clouds or the room or the BIM information for a certain part for some people, and so there's multiple layers excuse me, that you have to look at, I think, in the security. And I think also it's very concerning here that we see big infrastructure things being tapped into here in the US recently. But I think that has less to do with BIM per se, less to do with, I think it's more involved in the transmission and the connection. If you can't connect, and I mean, that's the biggest thing I think you've got to guard, the connect, the authentication. You can put all those layers in, but if somebody can find the weakness on a hole to get in, they'll go that route. They'll go the easy route to break in. They're not going to go and try and, crack some cybersecurity code that you have.
Yeah. I have quite a few. I try and champion 5G when it comes to a lot of the mobile site connections on construction sites, purely because I think we've been going down the 4G network routes for a very long time, and I need to champion that. But many of the questions I get, many of the objections I get is, how secure is 5G? But it's just as secure as 4 and 3 and any other type of communication.
Probably more so, yeah. Well,
really, indeed.
I would add another thought to that general 5G discussion. 5G may not be the dominant transmission. Things like LoRa, low power wireless LANs that have the distance and capability here in the US and everywhere are becoming competitive alternatives to traditional IP-based networking. And in some sense, they're more secure because the tools aren't out there to wirelessly hack or hack in through the wired section. It's a different technology. I really do think you're going to see the merging of 5G and LoRa, LoRa. especially in buildings and infrastructure and things like that.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got a few more questions that have been coming in as we go, and I think it touched a bit of a nerve, I think, out there on some people. IFC models, not issued for construction, but industry foundation classes. I think sometimes we get a little bit muddled up. And I think some people love them, some people hate them. Personally, I'm not that much of a fan. I think it's still very much mechanising the horse rather than inventing a motor car. But we've got some good questions here on those. So the first question on there is, in your experience, do clients request IFC models with a well-labelled spatial structure? And if so, do they actually care? And I think that probably is a question not only for the Mats, but also for Mark. Do your clients request IFCs? Do they care about that?
So for a lot of our projects, we'll get the client the IFC from the designer to construct from, and in a lot of cases, we find that the IFC models are very basic. They won't be structured in any way to easily understand them, and they're never really on the construction site grid, so on the coordinate systems that we would use. And I think that's what we've found, and what we're really kind of pushing at the moment is kind of a communication between ourselves and anyone who issues IFC models early on to kind of deliver those to our needs. So to kind of answer your question, I don't think it has been adopted, but it's certainly something that's being pushed more recently. And just it's a collaborative effort, really, I think. And the more conversations, well, I think from what my experience, the more conversations you have with people providing those IFC models, they're more than happy to help you. You just need to be clear and understand each other of what is actually needed from the IFC model on the construction side and to build from, really. I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add to that.
Matt, are you finding the same? Matt or Matt?
Have you got anything, Mr. Hull? Or?
I guess kind of like the IFC files, it just depends what you're needing to set out. I mean, a basic IFC model can be very useful whenever you're setting out on site. And if you are doing kind of verification, you're only needing those elements to verify. So, I mean, if it is basic, I have some customers that we work with that it's literally just the walls. They don't bring in the doors or windows because all the holes and the gaps and everything are there for them to work with. They don't actually need to have those additional elements in there to work with. So it does just depend on what you're being given. But we can work with IFC files. We can work with like 3D DWG files, DXF files, all sorts of crazy file formats that we get given to try and do things with.
So yeah, I mean, you can work with many different types of formats and file types, but in your ideal world, okay, it's an ideal world, and the client comes to you and says, "I can do anything. We can do absolutely anything." What would be your dream set of things that they could do to pass to you to produce the best results?
Yeah. Well, so from my side, sorry to interrupt, and the IFC is an interesting one because obviously it is effectively that read-only 3D model of whatever's been produced in the data set that's been requested, etc. Now, I've not seen too many applications of an IFC within regards to building into the sort of digital shadow of that space on asset delivery. Now, to be honest, I'm not. Why would you want a sort of, all right, nice data rich, but when that changes, you need modelers and everything like that. However, if you can get a reality capture, which is far more user-friendly, frankly, when we're talking, because for me, IFC, okay, great and stuff, as long as you've got the experience to use it or you've got a decent platform to be able to integrate with it. However, things like reality capture, certainly where you may have the photogrammetry that comes out of it, that allows an end user with low technical skill to actually adopt it. Now, this is okay, great coming out with all these great ideas, but if it's not adoptable by literally the end user to be able to integrate into that space and be able to get into the future digital twin sort of space, is it that useful really then? And being able to keep it up to date as well is obviously the big key. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would add too that, you know, IFC models are one, and with the digital twin space coming in, you're seeing alternate types of models and ontology development tools that are different. The haystack, the brick, even things like Kobe for facility managers. You don't want this to just be something that happens at the construction space. It's one of the, you know, digital twins is the term du jour. I really like the concept of digital threads better, to continuously take information from design and drafting all the way through to the owner operator. And that's a lot of what Agile Handover does. We do conversion stuff in the handover of BIM to Kobe to whatever your data structure is.
I think we probably hit the sort of timings, and we need to close out primarily here now, Stuart. So I shall hand over to you, but there will always be a bit more time to go down the rest of those questions and to delve in things a little bit deeper. So I'll hand you over to Stuart to close out the initial session, and then open up the bar for extra time.
Yeah, okay, we have got a lot more questions, and I hope we can answer them all. Yeah, thank you, Ian. So I want to just go back to that, and I'll come back to that in a second. Thanks to our sponsor. Thank you to those that have joined the community. The webinar will be available. I mentioned at the beginning, I'll make that available by Monday. There's a couple of things to do, and then get that publicised on the website. The next session we've got, I mentioned at the beginning, Fran's going to run that, Toys for Techies. As Fran said earlier, the elves and I have been busy in lockdown in the workshop with masks, and we've been cooking up more than just cookies. Okay. Another announcement is the community days for next year. Those are the dates. The first one is there or thereabout fixed. The second one is definitely fixed. That's at JCB's headquarters. And the last one in October is Milton Keynes. So I'm just going to skip back. I will say thanks to everybody, but let me just skip back to that particular slide. Now, I did say I would give everybody an opportunity to comment on that. And Levi, when we got together and we looked at the questions, I think the first question, how do you utilize the BIM model in your projects? We looked at the answers, and we said every project, sometimes, rarely, never. What's your thoughts on the replies there? I'm assuming you can see those percentages. Any thoughts? And I'll open it up to everybody else in a second or two. Levi, do you want to give me your thoughts?
Yeah, well, my initial response to that really is that it's quite encouraging to see that the 40% of people are using it, because obviously as a manufacturer, we have an interest in pushing forward our technology, but we also have a vested interest in the industry as itself. So we're not just doing this obviously for profit. Most companies, that is the end goal. We're not here, but it is good for the industry to see that people are actually adopting this, because like I said, we get to see the industry move forward. I mean, Fran sort of mentioned that the UK is fairly good at adopting technology. We're on site very often, and it's encouraging to see we've got lots of young, very enthusiastic, and that's not to discount anyone who's not classed as young. We've got good engineers out there, and we've got good skill sets in the UK. We've got some really good projects. So it's good to see that, I don't like waste, and I feel like by utilizing this, we've got sometimes, and every project is accounting for, my quick math work, 71%. That's really good to see. And obviously from this, we're hoping that those who are in that rarely and never category, approach us and allow us the opportunity to help see for themselves.
A good opportunity indeed. Anybody else got any thoughts on that before we move on to the next question? No. Okay, Levi, do you want to jump on the on question 2 then?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Mark alluded to the fact that, you know, sometimes there's just a little bit of a need for this collaboration and communication between teams and possibly, you know, different companies. So the availability being one of the biggest barriers is probably actually one of the most simple to overcome. Sometimes, you know, it's very easy to say, right, I don't have a model available to me, and leave it at that. You might find that you are 1 or 2 questions away from actually having access to that BIM model, 1 or 2 conversations away from finding out, you know, getting that information. And then obviously you're back in this position where you can start to utilize it. The accuracy of the BIM models is probably a conversation for another day, but it is interesting to see that that's the second biggest barrier. And cost and liability also, they didn't feature as heavily as I actually thought. I thought actually cost would be one of the biggest, or the perceived cost, for want of a better expression, would be one of the biggest barriers that was there.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question just come in from the floor, from the field rather, from Ben. If we're supposed to be BIM compliant, do these numbers, I think you're saying, stack up for those that are still using 2D for BIM?
Well, sorry to interrupt there, Stuart. I just wonder, almost especially on the back of 2. I mean, I'm sure some people when they answered that probably maybe thought this, but I wonder if it is a big its own column. So effectively technical skills available. Certainly I find within MEP environment, acquiring good sort of certainly BIM authorers, modelers is really difficult. And there isn't much of a sort of training platform around there that aren't inside certain large companies. So it is actually the skill force, whether that is a big one. So it's certainly for me anyway. Yeah.
I would definitely add to Matt's comments there that the workforce in general, getting good engineers, it's going to get more. It's in the States here, certainly it's more and more difficult, but to get people trained in those things.
Digital engineers, yeah. Yeah,
digital engineers. We really need to begin to start to push it through the education system. If it's not in the education, you're not gonna. These engineers don't appear out of nowhere. They may learn on the job. That may be probably the most prominent, but
sure.
It'd be fine when Minecraft released their construction management sort of piece, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah. I've got another question here. If I can just ask this one, I'm conscious of time. The biggest, I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is a direct question. The biggest challenge is keeping the data up to date if there are amendments and changes, and issuing to operatives in the field in time with the updated information. How is this process solved?
Reality capture for me, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a 2-part question. What information? For instance, if you have structural information, that generally doesn't change much. So that's a one-time. If you're talking about assets in the BIM model, it's a different question. That's a lot of what we do with Agile Handover, and taking documents and scanning them and pulling OCR information, auto-populating connections and things like that. I will make one other comment. You mentioned something interesting, Matt. You said that word metaverse, I think. Yeah. And obviously, you know, with Facebook making the change in name, I think that's going to be one of the biggest impacts you're going to see coming out in our space over the next 5 to 10 years.
Certainly when we start looking at our contracts.
Kids coming up that understand 3-dimensional thinking, if nothing else. And you'd be surprised at the tools that are available to take our traditional CAD thinking and import it into Unity or, you know, Real Engine.
Gamification, I think, is one of the best things for the construction industry soon.
Yeah.
But you need good data, certainly geometric data, to do that in the first place. So
we've got a question here from BAM. Mark, thank you, Mark, for this. Again, I think we touched on a little bit, but how do we automate and de-risk the digital workflow from design to setting out? Levi, do you want to take that one, please?
Yeah, sorry, say that one again, Stuart.
How do we automate and de-risk the digital workflow from design to setting out? That's a contractor's question.
Yeah, I mean, so we find this thing in industry as well, where we don't want to give you something that's 5 5 or 6 steps ahead, because everyone looks at it and goes, that's too far out. We don't want to dip our toe in and be the first one to do this. So we're always trying to stay just 1 or 2 steps ahead. So if you think about what the principles that we spoke about today, even just utilizing that 3D element and cutting out those steps would be a step to automation. With regards to the next steps, unfortunately, you're going to have to probably just wait and see a little bit on that. I mean, obviously, if you're already utilizing these modern methods of construction, that's great. And if you're chomping at the bit for the next step, then by all means, it's great for us to know. If there's customers out there who are maximizing what's already available and they're ready for the next steps, and that's great for us to know. So I appreciate it. Didn't fully answer the question, but that's, yeah.
Okay, I've got another question here. And again, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier about changing people's behaviors. This is from Chris at Wilmots. He's saying his biggest issue is actually changing behaviors on site so that they start making use of these systems and these models. I think hopefully with the demonstration you've given today, guys, it makes it clear, gets the message over that this is really efficient and contributes massively to productivity. And I think it's a case of rewatch it and get in touch and see. Sorry, Matt, go on.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to bounce on that. Now, to be honest, we've gone through obviously one of the biggest sort of change periods in certainly human sort of conscious and stuff in recent times in regards to COVID. Now, what that's done is pushed everybody to be remote, and now we've and it's almost thrusted people and those maybe who are a bit reluctant to be involved more digitally. So having that digital capture at site so you can get more remote sort of interaction and get more SMEs as well involved. It's been thrust upon us, but certainly from what I appreciate over the last sort of year and a half is the adoption off the back of that there's not much, the reluctance is gone. I don't see many people going back to, right, sod that off, we'll sort it back on site, to be honest, from my personal experience. So
I've got one more question, and this is from Donna. Donna's located in the US. Agreeing with Matt and Fran in terms of the lack of technical skills, both for engineers and foremen. So yeah, that's a tick. But especially for the smaller general contractors and subcontractors, I think there's an element of that here as well. But yeah, thank you for that, Donna. One other question. How can we streamline and solidify a process in this instance to make it more repeatable? Well, I think you touched on it earlier, Levi. I think having simple processes that capture data in a repeatable way, I think would make it better, more understood, and I think more usable. And
I mean,
anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, what the person asking that question is basically asking for is a workflow. So what we do is we look at where you want to end up, and we work backwards, and we present the best solution to get you from where you are to where you want to be as quickly as possible using this technology. So once you have that workflow established, then it becomes easy to roll out and repeat.
Yeah. I've got another question here, which is a contractor in the UK. I'm new to the construction industry, but not digital transformation, but I'm interested in learning the different use cases and to how BIM can be applied. And from today, I think, yeah, I think we've got some really good points, nuggets, and whatever else. I think without re-asking similar questions, I think we've pretty much covered everything. So what I'll do is I'll just go around the room and ask for sort of final comments, and I'll start at the left-hand end of my screen and ask Levi if you want to pitch in with a final 30 seconds before I move across to Mark.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, predominantly, thank you for taking the time to listen. But the encouragement from our side is, if there are any further questions on the back of it, or you want to see things in more detail, I think the proof is in the pudding with this kind of equipment. Let's come and show you on a live site, maybe have a look at a little workflow and take it from there.
Sure. And Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. So the only other thing I think I'd add would be to integrate it on site, just take it in small steps. As Levi say, Leica are really supportive, get them onto your site, they'll do a demo, and you'll see straight away the benefits.
Brilliant, thank you. Matt? Hull?
Yeah, there you go. I guess kind of as Levi said, I mean, if there's something you're interested in seeing, just feel free to get in touch, and we can show you all the different workflows, hold your hand in the process of getting you up to speed with that, and then really support you whilst you look at trying to integrate that into what you're wanting to do.
Sure, thank you. Matt Cunliffe?
Yeah, I suppose just a very quick sort of case study recently of that kind of adoption principle. We're doing a prestigious house in London, and it's all refurbed. It's a bit of a mess. The plans weren't quite there. The scan, the reality capture that we did with point cloud capture it's just given us so much great data for coordination from joist down to risers, as well as giving the actual every user in that sort of job even more access to the actual site.
Brilliant.
Straight away wins.
Yeah. Fran, give us 30 seconds, please.
Join me on December 10th.
It's only 5.
How do we get on the note of this?
Anything from Jerry?
We touched on a lot of things today, I think, and a lot of them, mention of the metaverse. It's a big thing. Hopefully, COMIT, begins to look into that. We're gonna crash those two worlds together.
We've had a fabulous session today. I mean, the number of questions, I don't think we've ever had as many questions as what we've had today. So I really say thanks to everybody for
Jerry.
Your input. Jerry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well done, everybody, and I agree with Fran. Do join us on the 10th December for the last webinar this year. I promise you, Fran will be illuminating and fun. Don't miss it.
Thank you.
Do we
You're
have to wear
setting a high bar there.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll have availability, accuracy, and no liability.
And a Santa hat on.
Just to close out, thanks again to our sponsor, O2 Business. Yes, the webinar will be available Monday. And there's Fran's session there, Toys for Techies. Hopefully I'll made enough cookies by the time we get to the 10th. And community days next year, and that's it. If there's nothing else, then I'll close up and start the download. But can I wish everybody a great weekend, and we'll see you afterwards.
Happy Black Friday from the US.
Yeah, well done. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Indeed.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Weekend.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.